Hello everyone, I'm Iron Phoenix and welcome to Industrialcraft 2 1.7.10. This is build number 714 and today I will be remaking the first few videos that I basically made for Industrialcraft 2 Experimental. This is basically because the range of machines has substantially changed. And it's now to the point where I think I can do a video because they're not going to be adding anything too major. At least I can remake this video. So, things I will not be going too deep into. Operating a nuclear reactor. I will not be going into machines or any of those other bits in this video. Those will be separate videos. Now, I will also be going to energy storage, but I will not be going into energy net as it's not currently working properly. So, I think that's all the stuff covered that I need to. So let's begin. So we start with these. These little things are the energy storage devices. We have 4 tiers of an energy storage device. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 and Tier 4, surprisingly. So we've got our backbox, our CESU, MFE and MFSU. The CESU is a new addition to Experimental, so you won't have seen that in previous versions of Industrialcraft 2, the sort of more stable versions from 1.5.7 or whatever it was. And this fulfills the role of Tier 2 now, so all of the tiers have basically moved up one by one. Or most of them. You know what I mean. So we've got our back box that's still at Tier 1, CSU is now our Tier 2 device, and Tier 3, Tier 4. What this means, and this is something that I generally have to talk about, because people do still try to make this mistake. They make their back box, they make their first nanosuit item, and then they put it in and say, why isn't it going in? Well, the reason for that is that this is a power tier 3 item. You do need an MFE to charge your suit. A rather nice addition is that you can now take your armor off. It does show you your armor here in all of them. So you can take your armor off and charge it and then put it straight back on again in the UI. So yeah, make sure that the power tier is the right tier for the item that you're putting in, and then it will charge fine. So things like drills, you want a bat box at least. You can charge power tier 3s in power tier 4s, can charge power tier 1s in 2, 3, 4, etc, etc. There are charge pad variants of these, but I will not be going into them in this video. I'll do it in machines. So that is storage. Now onto the fun stuff, your generators. So there are now 3 different types of generator. There are generators that make heat, generators that make rotational energy or kinetic energy, and generators that make EU. I've included this thing in heat because although it doesn't directly create heat, it does create coolant that makes heat. And you will actually now get more power from using one of these far upgraded nuclear reactors than using even your fully upgraded reactor here. This will cut it in half. Your EU output in well, it won't cut it in half per se. Well, your throttled output by 50% because it's in EU mode. If you put it in coolant mode, then it will create the full amount of power, but you do actually need to run that through different systems to actually get that power out. So it's a further upgrade, I guess, for your systems. So, let us begin. First off, we have our generator. You put burnable fuel in there and you get EU out. You also do have a buffer, so all of these devices are capable of storing a little bit of EU. Next up, your geothermal generator. You put lava in, you get power out. Next up, your semi-fluid generator. You cannot put lava in here, so don't bother trying. You can, however, use biogas from Industrialcraft 2. You can also use oil and fuel from Buildcraft. I haven't tested it, but you can probably use the biofuel from forestry. If not, you can always just run your biomass from forestry through a refinery, Buildcraft refinery, and you'll get fuel out of that. So that's that one. And they do, you can see how much they can potentially store in them. So next up we have our radioisotope thermoelectric generator. This is an EU generator that uses little pellets that you get from running breeder reactors. So you will need access to plutonium for these, but these will create a constant supply of energy. These will not overheat, these will not run out. So unlike a nuclear reactor, which will require a fair amount of just monitoring, you can just set one of these up, put pellets into it and just let it run. In my base on the FTB Infinity server that I play on, it's on Carbonated Gaming, I do actually run most of my base off RTGs. I have a semi-fluid backup and I also have a reactor backup. The semi-fluid is wired into the machines, so that's the backup for the machines, and the reactor is wired into the AE system. But the rest of the base but those are just backup systems. So I have an RTG that's powering the vast majority of my AE system, and I have an RTG powering my machines. So lastly we have our nuclear reactor, and I've just done the two different, well, you know what I mean, the types of reactor. So you've got your nuclear reactor box, which has its standard slots. These are all locked off. The more reactor chambers you add, this will actually increase the amount of space that you get in your reactor, all the way up to having 6 things on there, and then you get all the space. So the same as before, basically. Right, let's do the kinetics. No, let's do the heat next. So solid heat, you put solid fuel in, you get heat out. These little bits here are your heating elements, so your heat will come out of there. So your machines do need to have their heating elements, whatever they may be. Say that one actually needs to be on there. So make sure if your machines aren't working, or if your generators aren't working, make sure they are the right way around. Next up, fluid heat generator. You put fluids in here, so lava should work. No, lava doesn't work. It's biogas, isn't it? So yeah, biogas goes in, you get heat out. Next up, you have the electric heat generator. So this makes heat out of there from your EU stuff. This is rather useful for various systems so there are a couple of machines that do require heat to use, the fermenter and the blast furnace. So something like this hook it up to your EU network and just use that to make steel or refined iron. Your liquid heat exchanger, this uses lava and it turns it into pahoho, or it takes in hot coolant and puts out cold coolant. The more conductors you add, the more heat you get out of it. I should have noted there, this takes coils. You do need at least one coil in the electric heat generator to actually output heat. In the same vein, you do actually need at least one heat conductor to output heat from here. Last up, you have your radioisotope heat generator. This takes pellets and it outputs heat. So that's your heat generators. I'll go into the reactor in a sec. I know people want to see what that's all about. So, kinetic generators. We have the wind generator. Now, the wind generator, ideally, you want it up at about Y250-ish. And this will create rotational energy from wind. So, the higher up it is, the more energy you will get out of it. But if you put it up greater than 250, it will lose power. So I found that 250 is about the most optimal height. You can test the height using your wind strength meter or wind meter, and as you can see, it goes up the higher you are. Now, in a similar vein, we also have the water generator. Only works in ocean river biomes. You put that into a river, you put a rotor in there, and it produces kinetic energy. And you will need a rotor in the wind generator as well for it to actually make power. You have a choice of rotors. You have wooden, iron, steel, and carbon, with their different requirements. So, yeah, and you put one of those in and it runs, essentially. So next up you have the electric kinetic generator. You provide this with electricity and you create rotational energy. More motors you add, and you can, the more motors you add, the more transferable energy you can do, up to 1,000. You do need at least one rotor in here to actually create energy. Next up, manual kinetic generator. This works like the clockwork energy, the clockwork generator from Railcraft. So you right click and it creates rotational energy. Water generator we've done. Last up we have our steam generator. So this takes steam. It outputs water and EU. If you put too much steam in here, it's going to start sort of filling with water. If it fills with water, hold on, no. Yes, when you put steam in here, it starts filling with water. If you don't output the water, then the turbine will become damaged and eventually stop working, and it will also reduce its efficiency. So that will create rotational energy out of there, I believe. Yeah, and it will create steam. Right, so that's those. So these are in between things. So these will create EU out of kinetic energy or out of heat. So kinetic generator creates EU out of kinetic energy. Stirling generator creates kinetic energy out of heat. Last up we have our steam generator. Now I added this in because it's sort of a machine, but it's kind of needed for these various bits and pieces to work, or it's required for the line of heat to the Uber heat to Uber energy transfer. Essentially you put water and heat in, and then you can change these depending on how much water you want to put through the system, how much heat you're generating. more water you put in, you might just get water out of here. Obviously you want to be outputting steam, so the more heat, the more water you can put in, the more you can fiddle around with these numbers and the more steam you can get out. Now this is quite important because this baby over here is a nuclear reactor. This, unlike its smaller cousin, creates coolant rather than EU. You can put in exactly the same designs in there, but obviously you want it to be creating heat, because that's how it works. By creating heat and putting in cold coolant, it will create hot coolant, which you can then put into a liquid heat exchanger, which is then attached to a steam generator to create your steam, which is then connected to your kinetic steam generator, which creates energy from that, kinetic energy, and then you put that into a kinetic generator, which will create you EU. Yes, it's rather a long line of stuff to create EU, but it's meant to be your max tier of creating energy, and you're going to need it, because some of the things in the machines are kind of power hungry. But we will get to that when I do the machines video. Now, as of 7.15, the manual kinetic generator has been nerfed more. It seems that they were basically being abused. So it's nerfed for fake players, so you can't have a turtle standing there. And they've nerfed it a little bit more. I don't know quite what the deal is there, but yeah. So that is most of it, except for one thing, of course. I haven't shown you this. So let's peek inside this. So to make the generator, and I'll go into this in more detail in the reactor video. We have a max size reactor in the center, and then we surround it with a cube of reactor pressure vessels. We also need to add a hatch so that we can access it, a couple of reactor fluid ports, so you put your cold coolant in and your hot coolant out, and a redstone port to turn it on and off. Now, like those, these can overheat, they can start to melt, they can explode. And I'm sure you wouldn't want one of those to explode, so you will need to monitor these. But the way that you know that this is complete, the UI will look like this. If it isn't complete, you will still be able to access the reactor, but it won't actually do anything. When it's complete, your reactor pressure vessel, and the UI will look like this. It's a little bit of a shame that it doesn't sort of complete in the way like a big reactor will do. For now, it's good. It's good enough. You can the UI will complete when it's good. But for now, as the sun falls on my test environment, I will say thank you very much for watching. I hope this is useful, and I'll see you next time.